I'd like to introduce Darlene from the United States, who takes LDN. Thank you for joining me, Darlene.
Hi. I had lupus for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And started back in when I was raising my young children, and I felt fatigued and ill all the time till I found the LDN.
Mm-hmm. Before we get that far, Darlene, what other conditions do you have, autoimmune conditions, that you use LDN for?
Well, I use it for the Myasthenia Gravis also, another autoimmune disease.
And you said about Raynaud syndrome?
I could take it for that. I haven't really seen any results from that.
Okay.
It's helped it at all.
And do you have IBS as well, is that right?
Yes, and I haven't. They said I would need a lower dose for that, but I've tried the lower dose, and it helps the IBS, but then I don't get the benefit for the lupus.
Okay. So how old were you when you had the lupus?
I started when I was about 29 years old.
And what symptoms did you have at that time?
Just feeling ill and weak, like you had the flu or a fever. Felt feverish, but didn't run a fever.
That must have been very difficult with young children.
Oh, it was terrible. And I would go to the doctor, and he couldn't find anything wrong with me, but just, well, you're just feeling bad. Everybody would try to blame it on nerves, the depression, And it took 10 years for them to find a diagnosis.
And what were you offered once you'd got a diagnosis?
Then they said it was lupus, systemic lupus, and put me on the prednisone and all different drugs, which didn't really help or do any good for me.
And how long were you before you had these other autoimmune conditions?
The myasthenia?
Yes.
It was about 20 years that I had the lupus by itself.
Yeah. So.
And I really didn't respond to anything else.
And how many years was it from first being ill to having heard about LDN? How many years in between?
Oh, I didn't hear about LDN until 2009. And I started with the lupus in 1999 that I was diagnosed. So that would be 1989, I'm sorry. So that would be, 20 years?
So in that 20 years, what was your health like just before you found LDN? What was a normal day?
Well, I never planned anything. I was, if I planned anything, I would get sick. And my family thought I was just sick all the time. But I would feel well some days, and then other days I'd feel sick. So every time you'd plan something, you'd have to cancel because you'd get a flare of the lupus. And then you didn't feel well. So you had to cancel your plans. I went around like that, just raising my kids and living that way for 20 years.
And what would you say your quality of life was like at that point, with 10 being the best?
Oh, I would say about an 8. 10 being the best, or the
Yes, 10 being the best.
Oh, probably a 2. 2 or 3.
Okay. So
I had some, and then when I got to MG, it got even worse. The weakness was worse. Some days where I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't walk. I had to use a wheelchair. Couldn't walk distances at all. And some days I would crawl to the bathroom from the bed. I'd be so weak. I couldn't lift up a fork to eat. And that was all from the Myasthenia Gravis when that came. So then I had 2 diseases. I did get the thymus removed for the Myasthenia Gravis because I ended up getting thyroid cancer. to make a long story short, they said they would remove the thymus then, along with the thyroid, because I had wanted the thymus out, because they say you improve. And it helped the myasthenia somewhat, but not a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So then after that, I still had flares of the lupus and the MG, whatever it was. They kind of just called it the lupus syndrome because they didn't know which one it was bothering me, you know. Try to treat the lupus with all the lupus medicines, and none of them worked for me. None of them helped.
Mm-hmm.
Then one day I got an email about the LDN, and so I thought, wow, I'll check it out. So I started looking on the web and saw that people were really getting well with MS, and there were a couple of lupus patients on there. So I said, well, why not? I haven't got nothing to lose. To try it.
How easy was it to get a prescription?
Well, it wasn't too bad. I talked to Crystal on the internet to find a doctor in my area. And, of course, my rheumatologist didn't know anything about it. But I went to the doctor in my area. He was a regular internist, and he gave me the prescription right away.
And when you first started, did you notice any introductory side effects?
Oh, I noticed that no side effects at all for me, but I did notice a great difference in my energy. I was helping to move my mother. She was moving, and I had lifted boxes and all that, and everyone thought I'd be sick because with lupus you can't do that or you'll pay the next day, I guess, just like MS.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day I wasn't sick. I kept feeling good and kept helping her pack and lift boxes the whole week. Never got sick, just felt more energy and more energy.
No.
It was great, like a miracle overnight for me.
Wow. So how long have you been taking LDN now?
I've been taking since 2009.
So about 5 years?
6 years, yeah. 5 years, I guess.
That's amazing. So
right.
For how long did LDN continue to improve your condition?
Well, it just kept working, and I haven't had any flares for the 6 years. I even went through a lot of stress with my son because he had leukemia and was hospitalized and took all his treatments. It was very stressful, but he came through it, and I came through it without any flares. The medicine kept working, and I kept taking it.
And what would you say your quality of life is like now on that scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest?
Oh, mine's a 10. I'm like the difference between night and day. My whole family tells me that.
Goodness. And after being,
she just, I'm like a different person because I can do things I've never done before in my life. I'm able to do the things a normal person does.
Well, that's
I'm so thankful for that.
One amazing testimony, isn't it? I mean,
yes, and just one email sent to me really changed my whole life to get that drug.
So what would you say to other people who are thinking about trying LDN but maybe a bit skeptical?
Well, I can't guarantee it works for everyone. I have heard some people say it didn't work for them, but I don't know the situation or if they tried it long enough or any of the particulars, you know. But I can say it's worth a try because it has little side effects and it doesn't hurt to try it. If you're as sick as I was, you know, you have to try something. I couldn't go on like that.
Well, that's one amazing story. Thank you very much for sharing it with us, Darlene.